Laravel includes CSRF protection right out of the box, but you may not know exactly what that means, so let me show you. But first, Wikipedia tells us that in a CSRF attack, an innocent user is tricked into submitting a web request that they did not intend. And that's the gist of it. All right, so to demonstrate that, I've created two Laravel applications. One is target, and I'm using that term because it is the target of the attack. Now, the second application running on a different server somewhere else in the world is called attacker. This will be the site performing the attack on the target. Now, to make this work, once again, we're going to trick the user into submitting a web request that you did not intend. And we're going to take advantage of your browser's knowledge of your current state and what's in your session on a different application. Okay, so let's go ahead and log in. I have a test user here. Okay, and John Doe is logged into the target. Now I'm going to show you this in a couple forms. So first, here is the target website. And if I go to my routes file, now here we have our standard authentication routes. But for the first example, I'm going to use a GET request to perform a logout. It's not the end of the world, but as a general rule of thumb, this should really be a POST request. Anyhow, if you hit that URL, it will log out the user and return a string. So if I come back and we give this a shot, if I access logout, yep, we're now logged out of the system. Okay, but let's go back in. So assuming we're signed in, and also assuming that the attacker knows something about the endpoints for this application, they've tinkered around with it and they've realized, wait a minute, I can update this user by hitting this endpoint. Or if I make a GET request to that route, I can log out the user. It just takes a little bit of research. So assuming they've done their homework, so to speak, check this out. I'm now going to switch to the attacker project, and we're going to go to that welcome page, and just somewhere down at the bottom, it doesn't even matter, right here, let's just embed that URL in a broken image tag. So we'll do target.test/logout. This way we can immediately hit that URL when you load the page. Okay, so let's come back. Now, once again, remember, if I load the page, here we are signed in. But now if I visit a different application in a different server, load the page, we'll check this out. If I switch back, refresh, you're now logged out. So clearly, this is not something you want to allow. Your interaction on this website changed things on a different site, and most importantly, you didn't even know it took place. All right, so that's the easiest form of a CSRF attack. But let's switch back. So once again, this will get a little confusing, but I'm going to go back to our target application there. All right, and I'll get rid of this, and we'll stick with the standard authentication routes. If I visit the terminal and I run route list, you'll see if I zoom out, if the user makes a POST request to log out, we will log out the user. Okay, let's try again. So I will go back to our attacker application. I can no longer use this technique, but there's other ways to do this. We could do an AJAX request, or we could have a simple button that makes the user think they're doing one thing when actually it's doing another thing. So there's a number of ways to do this. So we'll just have a button that says continue, and let's just put it right up there. You know, this would represent somewhere on the site that doesn't seem too sinister. However, when they click on it, it's going to submit a POST request, once again, back to that original website. It makes a POST request to this endpoint. Okay, so let's give it one more shot. But first, on the target, I need to sign in again. All right, we're signed in. We'll now go back to the attacker, give it a refresh, and yeah, nothing looks strange there with that button, but you get the idea. So if they click on it now, it's not going to work. They get a 419, and you'll see it did redirect them to the target. So this is why this is a very clear CSRF attack, but there are ways to do it in a more hidden fashion, and this will usually be through an AJAX request that's being performed behind the scenes without you knowing. We're just using a button here to make it very clear. But yeah, in this case, we get a 419, and you may not be familiar with a 419. So for example, if you go to Symfony's response class. This is where I often reach to refresh my memory about the various status codes. You're not going to see anything for 419. And I'm not sure if it's part of the official spec. I don't think it is. But Laravel uses it to represent a failed CSRF verification. And let's see how that's happening. So we're going to go back to the target. And if I go into the HTTP middleware kernel, now we haven't talked too much about the kernel yet, so just come along for the ride. But I do want you to note right here, these are all the middleware that run when a new request is performed. And you'll see right here, there's a section called Verify CSRF Token. So if I take a look at that, and I come down to this handle method, again, don't get too overwhelmed. I'm just showing you the basics. But anyways, right here, it's checking if the tokens match. So it's trying to fetch a token from the request that was made. And then it's comparing it against a token in the session that Laravel creates automatically. Now, if those do not match, it's going to, if I scroll back up, it's going to throw a token mismatch exception. And ultimately, that's converted to a 419. All right, so this is a good thing. Laravel is protecting you without you even knowing what CSRF means. So if you think about it, now when the user clicks a button, yes, it submits a post request to a different server. However, on the target server, we performed a check and we said, all right, we have this token in our session. Let's make sure it matches what's in the request. And that way we can be entirely sure that the request being performed is that authenticated user. So let's see how it works normally. We're on our target. If we log out, everything works exactly the way you'd expect. So have a look. If we go to our target and we'll load that main layout file, that will render all of this. And if we scroll down, let's look for a logout section. Here it is. Okay, so we have an anchor that's in that dropdown, and when you click on it, it's going to submit the logout form that you see here. And this is what I want to point your attention to, this CSRF blade directive. All that is a helper that will expand to a hidden input. Let me show you. Let's sign John in again. And now take a look. If I open up Chrome DevTools, and we take a look at the form, that CSRF directive expanded to this hidden input. So now notice that the value is equal to that token from the session. So now when you submit the form, this token is included as part of the request. So when it hits your server, that Verify CSRF middleware, again, without you even knowing it's happening, is going to perform a match. Do these match? If so, we're good to go. Now, last but not least, you'll see that you do have your own Verify CSRF token middleware. It just extends the one we were looking at previously. However, this is where you can control exceptions. So there will be situations when you don't want automatic CSRF protection. And a common example of that is for Stripe webhooks. For example, when a charge is performed at Laracast, it will hit Stripe's server, the payment is created, and then Stripe will ping a URL back on the Laracast server with a big payload of data that I can then use to update the user or record something in the database. This is called a webhook. Now, in situations like that, I don't want any kind of CSRF validation. So in situations like this, I would want to exclude my Stripe webhooks or whatever it would happen to be, something like that. Anyways, you likely don't need to worry about that for a while, but mostly that's all there is to it. So as a general rule of thumb, do not forget anywhere in your system, when you are creating a form that submits a post or a put or a delete request, make it a habit to always include that CSRF directive. But even if you forget, it doesn't matter. As soon as you test it in the browser, the form submission is going to fail with a 419.